Hi, my friends. Welcome to Word Made Digital. This is episode 12 of season 2. We have for you today my friend Shaila Visser. She's the National Director of Alpha Canada, and also she works with the Global Leadership Team as one of the Senior VPs of Alpha International. So she's an amazing and inspiring world-class leader and communicator. We're going to be talking about the rebuild they've done of the Alpha Film Series and the Alpha Youth Series, and the innovation coming out of the Alpha Canada offices, and really Alpha as a whole, in reaching youth and young adults really effectively with the best news in the world. It's going to be great to get inside the head of this amazing leader, and we're going to learn a ton together in this episode from the model of what Alpha is doing in reaching people for Christ. So hey, thanks so much to my alma mater, Wycliffe College, for making this whole podcast possible in season 2. Wycliffe College, if you don't know, it's an evangelical graduate school of theology at the University of Toronto. So Wycliffe offers affordable and flexible theological education. And I think for me, one of my greatest learnings from Wycliffe was how to be a lifelong learner, to ask better questions, to disagree well, consider new perspectives, and really integrate theology into my everyday life, which I think is actually really related to what Alpha is trying to do, how to integrate a normal way of talking and thinking about God into the conversations that people really need to have to make transitions towards Christian faith. And so for me, it was a really impactful experience to go and study at seminary. If you want to know more about Wycliffe College or more about what my experience was like there, they've done an interview just for you as listeners, wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital. I'd love you to go check it out. Go skim through, go read, or click around and see what else they have to offer on their website. And just love you to give a shout out to Wycliffe if you're checking it out. I know a number of you have been saying now that you're taking courses. Some of you have even gone into now full-time study at Wycliffe. That's so exciting because I know it will make a big impact on your life and the community where you serve and where you lead. All right, without further ado, here's my conversation with Shaila Visser.
Welcome to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. You're listening to Season 2, sponsored by Wycliffe College. Word Made Digital brings you interviews with brilliant Christian creatives and communicators to inspire, challenge, and equip you in your own work. The church carries the best news in the world, so we want to help you be the best creatives and communicators in the world. Here we go.
Hi, Shaila. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm so glad to have you.
It's great to be here, Joanna. I'm so privileged to be interviewed by you today.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know about that. It was amazing to get some of your time. And I'd love, first of all, who are you? Can you tell people who are listening, if they don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a Vancouverite, but I was born in Ontario, went to the University of Western Ontario and moved out here for a job and never left the West Coast. I'm married for 19 years to my husband, Ryan, who's on the canine unit of the Vancouver Police. And we have 2 dogs, a retired canine and an active one, and that's our family.
Wow. So you have big dogs. When I hear canine, that's not like a dog that fits in a purse.
No, and their names are Blade and Talon.
Whoa, amazing. Amazing. I love that. And you obviously in Vancouver, you're working with Alpha. I mean, you travel all over the world. That's why I'm saying it's so great to have some of your time. I never know where you're going to be.
I feel like I don't know where I am half the time. When you're on a plane as much as I am, you wonder, which city am I in? And you hope you know.
So tell us about this work that you're doing. What's the thing that's bringing you all over the world? Tell us about what is Alpha.
So I have been involved with Alpha, which for your listeners that may not be familiar with it, is an introduction to the Christian faith that was birthed out of an Anglican church in the center of London in the UK that has gone on from being one course running 3 times a year in that church to courses run in thousands of churches around the world with about 2 million guests going on Alpha. And it was designed for and is intended for people who have questions about faith, who may have a different faith than Christianity, and Alpha provides them a safe environment to have a meal and a conversation and listen to a talk, which is our film series that I think we're going to talk about today. Yeah. But it's been something that I've personally found very helpful. I find conversations that are open and honest with people that think very differently than I do, who have different experiences, I find them fascinating, life-giving, helpful for my own, I guess, spiritual and psychological and emotional development. And so Alpha's provided that for me both personally, but also it's been a place that I get to practice some of my leadership gifts. And I've been the national director since 2010, and we have a staff team that works both nationally and globally, and it's amazing. And so I'm the senior vice president global as well, and I head up currently development, which is fund development and leadership development.
Yeah, you put the fun in fund development.
That's right. That's exactly it.
So, and this is a program. Alpha is an organization that's all over the world. You'll know the numbers better than I do. Like millions of people have gone on Alpha. What's the number? Where are we at today?
Over 24 million people have taken Alpha around the world. About 2 million a year right now are taking Alpha. And in Canada, just over 100,000 a year take it.
And how many languages or nations approximately?
Yeah, 100 nations, about 90 different languages. And it's continuing to grow. And in Canada, we have about 5,000 Alphas that run a year right now.
Okay.
And they're run in places like prisons, out of churches and community centers, pubs, university and college campuses. It's run by students for students in high school. It's been amazing.
And so this is the power to me of what Alpha is compared to a lot of other initiatives, formulas, books, programs, whatever, that are trying to communicate and reach people, reach this generation for Christ, tell them about Jesus and offer a platform for that. What is it about this video thing, the power of film in communication? Because there's lots of other ways we can communicate, but each week that people come on Alpha, there's a film, there's food, there's conversation. But why is it? Talk to us about the video aspect of it. Why do you use videos?
Well, there's a few reasons. One is you can really craft a story and film, and there's consistency of quality and excellence as well. Yeah. That means that whether you're taking Alpha in Cape Town or Vancouver or New York or Rio, you're watching the same quality content in your language because it's been dubbed and subtitled into many languages. And I think there's something powerful about being able to communicate in a film series what spirituality from a Christian perspective can look like and feel like, and you can actually give texture in a film. And you can, we really have created a journey motif in the film series that we produced, and the journey motif really represents what's also happening on an Alpha in a small group. Everybody's on a journey, but so are those that are on screen. They're in a journey of exploring Christianity and communicating the message of the gospel.
Right. Well, and like the current film series that you're using to give people an idea, it's shot all over the world, like literally
11 different countries.
Yeah. And so this is not a video that was shot just on a green screen in a studio somewhere in London, England, or in Vancouver, Canada, or I don't know, in LA or whatever. This was all over the world. And obviously that would cost some amount of money. Yeah. But so why did you think that was valuable to take it out of a studio or just out of a studio setting or a church setting and actually bring people to all these different cities and places?
Well, I'd say a few things. A core value that we have is around excellence and providing the church whom we serve with excellent quality material is really significant for us. And I think significant as well because we believe that the story that we're trying to tell, which is the gospel, is of utmost value and utmost importance. So why wouldn't we do our best and put our best effort into it, including money, time, creative talent, etc. But then I'd say the last reason that we have sort of prioritized this global component is authenticity. You know, the world is shrinking in terms of, you know, we have specifically focused on the under 30 age category with this film series when we designed it. And so the Alpha film series was created with sort of 24-year-olds in mind, although it works for any age group. And in doing so, we realized that, putting people in front of a green screen is not the ideal scenario. Actually being on the ground where you could practically smell when they're in different parts of the world on streets, and you think, okay, that's New York City, look at those yellow cabs, or that's definitely Jerusalem. We can see the Temple Mount, and oh gosh, they're beside Galilee right now, and you can tell, so people are traveled, they're used to it, but there's an authenticity to, they tell stories about Jesus from where Jesus likely could have told them from, or at least the country he told them from. They interview people in their home country. So if they're telling a story from India, it's the people in their living rooms in India, or it's in a studio in LA, or it's in Chile with the Chilean miners, or we're with Scott Harrison from Charity Water in his office in New York City. So we really did try and put an authenticity to it. These are where people live and play.
And what do you think about that when we're, as a lot of people who are listening are creatives and they're communicators, they're working with limited budgets, but they have these huge dreams and huge passions. So what is it that sort of you were able to kind of rally people behind that allowed these kinds of resources to be able to be used? Because as you said, I joke, you put the fun in fundraiser. How were you able to find the funds? Because it costs money and it's a worthy cause.
Yeah.
But how do you get the money to do a creative project of this magnitude as a Christian organization?
Yeah, I think I probably think the better story to tell in this regards is around the Alpha Youth Film Series, which we released in the fall of 2013. The reason being, it had never been produced before. It was amazing because we had to find money we'd never raised. We had to find a whole film crew, executive producer, directors. We'd never done that before. So as an organization, we had no muscle memory of what does it mean to produce a film series. So I joke to people that we were trying to produce something we'd never done before for an age demographic we'd never tried to reach before with no one who had filmmaking experience on our end from the organization. And the two guys, Jason Ballard and Ben Woodman, whose brainchild it was, who actually ended up being on it as
These are two Canadian guys.
Two Canadian guys from Langley and Vancouver. And they had this idea that they pitched to me. And after lots of thoughtful prayer and conversations with many youth leaders across the country and influencers, we decided to go for it. And literally, I had people that I went to for the money to fund it say, but your organization doesn't do this, but you've never done this, and what kind of film experience do you have? And I'm like, 0, 0, and 0. And, what is the budget you think you can raise for it? And we had thought we could raise $1 million, but it was under 700,000, believe it or not.
Wow.
And we had to do 13 episodes, each around 21, 23 minutes. And you can imagine 13 episodes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of minutes on screen. And anyone that's a filmmaker can do the addition quick. They're like, how did they do it that cheaply? Well, we found people that just thought this vision is compelling. We have to do something to equip teenagers to have spiritual conversations. We were so aware in 2013 of the issues of the day, which have only gotten worse at this point, where teenagers who are cutting themselves or suicidal or depressed, they're asking questions about meaning and future and hope. And what did the church have to offer them? Well, we have hope to offer them. We have life to offer them. But how can you do it in a compelling way? And I think people caught the vision, even though they realized the reality of this actually working was a big gamble. And I think of the people that invested with us as angel investors, literally people who probably thought, I may have just flushed all my money down the toilet for this project, but let's give it a go. And, I think because we were doing it on a shoestring budget with people with no experience, we all aged a decade in, 2 years, but it was amazing. And I think sometimes the best projects are built out of constraints. I think constraints are sometimes a gift. And I know you guys in your world would know much better than I do that you have a choice. You can only have 2 out of 3. You can have creative excellence. You can do it in a time-sensitive way, or you can do it financially with financial, limitations. And we picked finances and and creative as the two. And then time, it took longer than we had expected. But once we were rolling, it was on schedule. But we just really wanted to do as well as we could. And we launched it, and we had about 75 alphas running in a calendar year for teenagers. And in a 6-week period, we went to 900 once we launched the Alpha Youth Series.
Whoa.
So it was overnight success in the sense that people wanted it, and the church was looking for something like this to engage young people in really good conversations about spirituality from a Christian perspective. And we were thrilled, and it went then globally to 45 countries, 19 languages. So our initial investors were very pleased with the results.
I'm sure.
But I think constraints, I don't know why constraints sometimes can be your best friend, because they require you to think differently, to engage people, and for people to really understand why. Why is this project important? Most people buy in for the why, and especially when it's a pilot. They'll buy in for the why before they'll buy in for like the proven tactics or impact.
Right. Well, it makes me think of to go in this direction for a minute. It makes me think of the name of my podcast. It's called Word Made Digital, which is a play off of John 1, and the Word became flesh and blood and dwelt among us. The incarnation of God in flesh is a limit that he puts on himself in terms of putting himself in this human, putting himself inside the box, so to speak. And within those limits does something of eternal and infinite importance in the constraints of the human body. And so, I mean, we have a good model in Christ, I think, of what it means to work within limitation, that he has chosen to limit himself for our sake. And so I think it's so inspiring, because a lot of creatives, it's just like I started with this question for you, right? It's wouldn't it be nice if we could do these projects and have these big visions, but nobody believes in my creative dream, or they don't understand. The guys upstairs don't understand. The guys or girls upstairs, they don't understand. And if only I had more money, or if only I had more help, or if only. But what does it look like to work within our limits? What were the 3 things? It's a good reminder. I've heard that before. Can you say it again?
Time, money, and creative excellence.
Right. You can only
ever have 2 of the 3. And
so
lots of people say, I want all 3. Yes, everybody wants all 3. You don't get all 3. The world's reality says you get 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
And so you have to pick. But can I just say a little bit about constraints? And the beauty of constraints is that you get to sell the why more than anything. And I think when creatives, because I have lots of people come and pitch me ideas now that I've executive produced 3 film series, they're like, oh, we could do this together. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how did I end up in this seat? But I would say from a executive producer seat, the ability of a creative to sell the compelling why and becoming really skillful at that is what gets things done. And so if you have a creative vision and a story you want to tell, a project you want to do, figure out the why and what problem are you facing that you're trying to solve, or you're trying to address, or you're trying to highlight or bring information out to the public, and think about how would you sell that, and meet with friends or colleagues that have a skill in that area and refine it with them, because selling your vision and the why behind it is actually the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's true. Especially the starving artist, quote unquote, who's looking for someone to catch their dream. And there definitely are. We all have dreams. We all have dreams that we would love for others to come and rally around us with. We have to get better at talking about it. And you're saying that we have to practice.
Yes.
To practice talking about it will help us get better at engaging other people in it. So obviously just you did this alpha series, youth alpha series in Canada, and then it went around the world. But you've since then done it again.
Yes. Well, when you're creating content for teenagers, you can't let it sit on a shelf for very long. The shelf life is quite short. So we think that every 4 years we have to redo the Alpha Youth series to keep relevant. I mean, everything from the clothing to the way we speak to how the content is written to engage a certain demographic. You have to be updating that. And so we've realized as an organization that has to be redone every 4 years.
You've actually built that in. That's sort of the sunk cost is there's a shelf life that's more limited for the youth than there is for the adult series.
Correct.
But you've also,
although we're only giving ourselves 5 years on the Alpha film series.
Oh, really?
So we are quickly becoming a content producing organization for our film series.
Wow. And do you have a production house inside of the Alpha organization?
No.
How does that work organizationally? Are you hiring a company to come partner with you on that?
What we have done historically, although we need to shift some of this, is that we have historically hired a production company, so the executive producer and the director, and then they hire all the talent behind it to bring it to life, including storyboarding, a storyboard artist, a composer for the music. We did a lot of our own music, so we didn't use very many songs. Yeah, we had a composer out of LA that worked with us, a Christian composer.
Wow. Oh, see, I'm learning all these behind the scene things. I've seen so much of this work. If as people are listening, let's tell them for a second, where can they go and get a glimpse of the films that we're talking about?
Yeah, if they're in Canada, alphacanada.org/run. And if you go in there and you look for our film series, you'll find them under Run. And then
outside
you'll
of
be able
Canada?
to look at the content. Outside of Canada, if you're in the US, alphausa.org. And if you're globally, alpha.org.
Okay.
And we have samples of all of them online. So the first episode is available and the rest are watermarked, I think.
Got it.
And then if you want to run it, then you can register and get it all for free.
Yeah. And this all started out of this church in London, UK, as you said, with a problem to solve and a pastor with a vision to reach people. And I don't know if maybe this is in my own mind, but sort of the first rendition of it was sort of some like tapes, like audio recordings, or
oh my goodness,
like the technology has changed so much, or like some guy with a camcorder in the back filming a guy on stage.
In 1993, I think the very first versions were audio tapes. Then we moved to VHS, then CDs, and now everything's available online for download. So it's moved with the times.
Yeah, well, and a lot of Christian organizations don't. And so, what do you think it is in the ether in your organization that allows you to say, we're going to rebuild this every 4 years? We're not going to be satisfied with using content that is older technology. What is it? What is it about that?
I think there's a couple of factors that have played into this. I'll say in Alpha Canada, and then I'll speak to Alpha International. In Alpha Canada, I am in my mid-40s, and our staff are predominantly under 40. So the guys that wrote the Alpha Youth series did so in their 20s and early 30s. The people that worked on the Alpha film series, mainly in their 30s. So we have a very young demographic. Of a staff of about 45 people at Alpha Canada, I think only 6 or 7 of us are over the age of 40. And so we do have this entrepreneurial mindset of young people that are engaging digitally, that are thinking about new technology. So that's very helpful. Globally, and particularly in London out of Alpha International, both the church staff and the Alpha International staff are very young as well, and are really thinking through how we engage and have conversations that really are quite meaningful, and realize what creating content is key to that.
So keeping younger voices around leaders, like you're a middle career leader yourself, but you're trying to keep younger voices around you.
Yeah,
all the time.
I can't say enough, Joanna. If you are my age or older, predominantly you should surround yourself with people that are younger by a decade or more. Our lead team at Alpha Canada, half of us are over the age of 40, and the other half are under the age of 33. And so it's wonderful, and they are talented, creative people. I love it. I have become a much more effective and better leader overall because I'm surrounded by so many different thinkers. I think that's what we do as leaders. You never surround yourself with people that agree with you all the time and think like you. You surround yourself with people that are very different. And we've done that at Alpha Canada, and it's been wonderful and a gift to me. And we have great, honest, direct conversations, but the ability to learn from people that are less experienced and younger in age has been one of the joys of my life.
I love that. Well, and in an organization that's trying to be a place where people come to learn and explore, it would be, I think, problematic if the leaders of the organization were not interested in learning and exploring and asking questions. And so it's really, you're complementing the thing you're trying to offer to other people with your own posture. Yeah, I love that.
That's exactly it. We say that we're alpha on the inside as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I love that. Mm-hmm. And so tell us about some places or some places that Alpha runs. Would you have any story about an unusual place? Like, you've talked about prisons, you've talked about college campuses. Do you have an example of some unusual or creative place that you have heard about Alpha's happening?
Yeah, you think about prisons in Uganda. Wow. They are not prisons in North America.
Right.
This is where people they rotate to sleep in their cells because they've packed 20 people into a cell that should have 5, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And to know that they run Alpha there using a film series that I co-executive produced is humbling. To know that in Hong Kong, business people that work in high-rise buildings are gathering at lunchtime or after work for drinks and appetizers and taking Alpha together with their work colleagues. Or I think in the early days, one of my my favorite story was about in Kenya, that there was a pastor on a bike with the VHS tapes and a generator and would play them out for nomadic people. And I just think, how on earth something that was created in central London originally would work in Kenya was mind-blowing to all of us. But I'm quite humbled by the places it works. And my most recent favorite story is my associate pastor just got back from a missions trip to Mongolia. And so he's giving an update from being there as part of his sermon. And he says, his driver wasn't a Christian 5 years ago. And his taxi, kind of his driver for his whole trip. And he said the first day that they were driving out, who knows where in Mongolia, it looked like no man's land. And he was talking about how his wife had become a Christian, how that had happened, and then how his wife had wanted him to become a Christian, but he was very resistant. And then she invited him on Alpha. And here is my pastor from Canada in Mongolia, in nowhere's land, hearing a story of a man's testimony who went on Alpha. And then he said to him, and now I'm involved with Alpha. I'm one of the translators for the new Alpha Youth series. And I just, I sat in church that day and I just kind of wept over the joy of being involved with something which at the time you're in it can be painful at times, very exciting, but you have no idea how it'll be used. And to see it actually impact people in places like Mongolia, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, and it's just this amazing thing where only God can do it. We would never dream this up. There's no strategic plan that we create for that man to be the next translator of the Alpha series.
I had no dreams of Mongolia, none. I mean, maybe I hoped it would impact the U.S., but that's about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we see this, I think of what Brian Houston of Hillsong says. I know it's a different organization, obviously, but they talk about what they do with their model of church. I've heard him talk about how a lot of people would say if you go into a new culture, a new place, well, that was great that it worked in Australia, but it's not going to work in the center of Paris, France, because the people in Paris don't do church, they don't do evangelical. They're not into any of this. It's not going to work. And then they'll enter a new city like Paris, and they are bringing the sort of the same thing that they do in Australia, but now it's happening in Paris, France, and it's thriving and vibrant. I don't know, thousands of people are part of that church in the heart of Paris, in a place where they kind of were told it couldn't be done. And so I'm curious about what you've learned about that translating I'm thinking of they have a production and they have mute, like even the songs that they sing, right, are being translated into other. What would you say to that? What are you learning about taking that video you're making for teenagers in Toronto or Vancouver, Canada, and watching it connect with people in Mongolia? What are you learning?
I think the thing that I'm the most surprised about is how a teenager in Nairobi and a teenager in Singapore and a teenager in Colombia, and in Canada are more similar than they've ever been in the history of the world.
Wow.
They have the same sort of phones. They watch the same content. There's, of course, different cultural content in every country, but the type of music they listen to, the type of speed in which they intake information, all of that's becoming more and more common. And we're finding that when we create content for teenagers, it works in urban centers. It may not work in rural Uganda. It may not work in your rural Latvia. Right. But in city centers, there is a commonality of this next generation that is surprising even to me.
Wow. Yeah. And you're thinking that's even more true today than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
That's correct. That's correct. It's increasingly so.
Wow.
And there's something about that's really exciting and scalable for lots of reasons, but also a bit sad to lose all that cultural differentiation. But it is happening. I think the second thing I'd say is that storytelling is thousands of years old, and the ability to tell a good story crosses cultural barriers.
Yeah, and would you say that's do you think that's the magic, quote unquote, of Alpha, is story? What is it that, it's not a formula.
No.
But what is it that works, that just seems to work? The statistics, right? Of like how many people who go on Alpha and then become Christians or renew their faith after going through Alpha. I mean, the statistics are amazing.
They're remarkable.
What's the magic?
I'm going to say that there's 4 components. And I'll give you the first component, which is the most obvious. And for your listeners that have never heard of Alpha before or have heard, but they're like, I have no idea what that is, I'm going to go look at it. If you just look at the film series, either the Alpha film series or the youth film series, and you base your decision on going to an Alpha or running an Alpha based on that, you will miss the 3 other components that make Alpha fabulous. And that is, there is always food. There is something supernaturally wonderful about having a meal. And given that the biggest issue in Western culture, if not globally, certainly in global cities around the world, is social isolation. Having a meal where you're looking someone in the eyes and laughing and talking about your day and the weather and the latest news story or funny thing you've seen on social media is a wonderful sort of part of the magic, as you call it, that makes Alpha work. So it's having a meal, then watching a quality film series. But then we also have open dialogue. After you watch an episode of the film series, there's open dialogue where you have a facilitator helping with the conversation. They're not giving answers. They're just saying, so what did you think? What about this comment? And you hear so many perspectives. And there's this beautiful nuance for each group. Each group is different, but there's this beautiful journey that they go on together, exploring what they believe individually. And then 3/4 of the way through, we have a retreat, the Alpha Weekend. And on it, people get a chance to decompress from their work week, get more time in their small groups, more time to chat and wonder and question. But they also have a chance to hear more about the Holy Spirit, which is the third person of the Trinity that we talk about in Alpha. And I think we really believe in encounter. So we have the head and the heart covered. We have head information in the film series. We have stories that hit hearts, but then we have encounter, where we invite God actually to be present with people that are searching and asking questions. And that, if you have those 4 components, which are about radical hospitality, an open table, excuse me, and an invitation to be open to encounter, that's really the secret sauce of what makes Alpha really effective.
Well, I love what you're saying too, is that in a digital world, in a place where a kid in Lebanon and a kid in New York could have the same phone and be using the same Instagram apps, this digital world that we live in, yet that personal touch, like that weekend away that you try to encourage every group to do, is still so powerful. Like that isn't gone in the digital world. People still want the human contact. Right.
I'd even say it's more important.
Wow.
Because people aren't getting human contact like they once were. I think 28% of people who live in Canada live alone. 28%. And that's from Stats Canada.
Right.
So you can imagine there's a lot of lonely people out there. They go into a cubicle at work, or they're pushing hard all day at work, and they come home and they eat alone.
Yeah.
So to have conversation with someone over a wonderfully home-cooked meal is a real blessing to the world.
Yeah. And yeah, you're talking, you have so much data and stats in your head. I'd love to get a little deeper into some of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yes.
Like, what are the needs of this generation? I think you're saying that people actually do care and are curious about Christian faith in an age where, politics have muddied the waters of evangelicalism, especially in the U.S. And, people are like, in Canada, churches are closing, thousands and thousands of churches are closing, but you're finding people are interested in Christianity.
Angus Reid Forum just did a study that came out sometime in the last couple of months, maybe 6 months in Canada. And Angus Reid is well known, for those who aren't Canadians in your listenership, has done sort of studies and been a long time pollster, et cetera, in the country. And one of his latest studies was about the spiritual temperature of the country. And he says 20% of people either go to church Christmas, Easter, or regularly. 20% of the people will never darken the doors of a church. They are not interested in spiritual conversation. They would consider themselves atheists or agnostics, but on the angry side, not interested. But he said there's a full 60% that are open to a spiritual conversation. And that really is where Alpha fits in the country, is who are those people, your neighbors, your work colleagues, your friends, your grocer, your dry cleaning lady, that are finding themselves socially isolated, are looking for community, are open to spiritual questions. They just need an invitation. But I think the church typically sees those stats very incorrectly based on their own experience with a neighbor or family member, friend. They'll say, oh gosh, 10% go to church on any given day, and maybe 10% are open, but 80% completely closed off. But that's not what Angus Reid Forums has found out from polling the country. Wow,
interesting. And so then the key to doing Alpha is going on Alpha, you have to get there. You have to get people in the room. And I don't mean you have to trick them, but if people are, you are finding, the stats are finding, research is showing that people are interested. If nothing more, people who are lonely, they're looking for a meal with other people. There's this quote from The Guardian about Alpha. It says, what Alpha offers, it's attracting thousands of people. They're offering people permission, which is rare in a secular culture, to discuss the big questions of life and death and meaning. That's from The Guardian, which is a London, England paper. I love that they're offering permission to people to have these questions. But first they have to say that they want to come. And so what is your experience in how to communicate? I mean, I think of some of the campaigns you've done to try and get people in the room. Because I think once they're in the room, they're going to really enjoy the experience. But how do you get people in the room in the first place?
It's an age-old question for us at Alpha. It's like, how do people come? Our stats tell us, globally and in Canada, 80% of people come on Alpha because a friend invited them. And so we can do all the media campaigns we could want in the world. We could spend millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, they may catch a sign and it may help them to say yes, to know, okay, this isn't some weird cult thing. But 80% come because someone invited them. So the question really is about people of faith in Canada. Will you be bold enough to invite, to take a risk and a step of faith. And, sometimes people will say no 10 times and they come on the 11th time.
Yeah.
And, we can't harass people. It is an invitation. But the other thing is we invite them to come and check it out once. We never invite them to come for the whole of Alpha. I mean, I don't know about you, Joanna, but if someone said to me, would you come on a 10-week course? I'd be like, no. You don't even need to tell me what it is.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Yeah.
Ain't nobody got time. But what I would go to is come check it out. I thought, what do I have to lose by checking it out? And then we say, come back next week, come check it out next week, and then come the week after. But never do we say, you must sign on some dotted line, we will follow up with you. Actually, there's no pressure, there's no follow-up, just come check it out. But I think the real motivation is that people of faith in Canada need to actually believe that an invitation is worthwhile.
Yeah, and I mean, for not everyone listening to the podcast is Canadian, but I know for the context of Canada it's a more post-Christian culture. I think a lot of people feel like we aren't supposed to talk publicly about our faith.
Oh, right on.
It's awkward. It's politically incorrect. And Christians in general, in my experience in Canada, are, and I think this is true in many other countries now that are post-Christian or becoming post-Christian. The U.S. is becoming post-Christian. We're really strongly disliked. If we're not hated, there is a strong dislike, and so there's this fear of the invitation. Yet, when we know that the thing that they're being invited to is not lame, that you're saying right. like the content quality of the films that you're producing, of the experience of the food, of the conversation around the table, the permission that's given to have real questions, is so valuable that I think people will come if we invite.
And the other thing is, I think especially in Europe and Canada and Australia, places that are much more secular than the U.S., but perhaps not Portland or Seattle or New York City, places like that, I actually think that we have done ourselves a disservice as Christians, that we assume because of what's written about online or in the press that everybody hates us. And the reality is, you have lots of people in your life that wouldn't share your opinion. And they love you, and they enjoy you, and they want to spend time with you. Yeah. So I think rather than think we're put into some strange box or some strange corner because we're these weird Christians, I think we have to embrace the fact that actually we have real relationships where we love and are loved by people that think very differently from us. And how do we engage them and invite them in a loving way that doesn't put undue pressure on them, but in a way that welcomes them and says, you are welcome at this table, come check it out.
Yeah, love it. So as a last question, what are you hopeful for as you look towards the future, as you see these young leaders coming up, millennials and Gen Z after them? What are you excited about the future of the church?
I could not be more excited about Gen Z, truthfully. And it's because of our experience with the Alpha Youth series that, this year alone, so 2018, we had over 400 alphas run by teens for teens, so student-led. These are young people as young as 12 years old that are saying, I've got to make an impact in my school, with my friends, on the soccer team or the volleyball team or basketball team. And I just love that they're so brave. When I think back to myself in high school, it was like embarrassing to even say I went to youth group. Yeah. And here these teens are in much more secular society saying, I actually want to make a difference. And I just have so much hope because I see them in a very complex world, really walking by faith and being bold to invite and going out and trying to make a difference in the world. So I am very excited about Gen Z.
Awesome. Well, Shaila, thanks so much for your time. And we're going to link in the show notes where people can find, maybe they want to find you, but they definitely want to find where Alpha is. Maybe they want to find out where it's happening in their own local community, because millions of people around the world are doing it. So there's going to be somewhere near them that they can find to invite a friend to. So thanks for your time, and can't wait for people to go on Alpha.
Thanks, Joanna. It's great to be with you today.
Thanks, Shaila, so much for that conversation. I love seeing women in these kind of key leadership roles in global organizations. She's inspiring to me, and the work that Alpha does is just really so personally inspiring to me. I love what Alpha is about, what they're doing. I was able to go this spring to one of their huge conferences in London, in England, and sit in Royal Albert Hall with thousands and thousands of people who have been impacted personally and as churches by the Alpha movement. So it's exciting to talk to one of the leaders. Hey, next up, we have Australian pastor, author, and troublemaker Paul Bartlett. Next week on the podcast, we have Paul, and he and his wife are lead pastors of Lighthouse Church in Australia. He's also part of the state executive for Australian Christian Churches in New South Wales. So that's actually, for reference, that's the denomination that Hillsong has more recently stepped away from to become an independent church of their own. So Paul has written a book called Thank God It's Monday, and basically it's about living every day with purpose and focus. These 6 days of the week that we aren't in the church building, how do we live those with great hope and great purpose? So he's a funny and cheeky guy with tons of experience in leadership in the church, in the post-Christian culture, and you're going to love the conversation. I think it's really going to inspire and turn on some light bulbs for a few of us in our heads. Hey, thanks again to our sponsor, Wycliffe College, for helping make this podcast even possible week after week. I'm really grateful for their partnership in season 2 of the podcast. Wycliffe offers really affordable theological education. It's just $602 per course if you're a domestic student, flexible, in class, online, full-time, part-time, whatever works for your schedule. If you want to dip your toes in or go full in to theology and seminary training, they have something for you. You can check out more at wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital, and we'll see you next week with Paul Bartlett.
Thanks for listening to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. If you like this content, hit subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Head over to joannalafleur.com for more free tools, interviews, and media for creatives and communicators. We'd love to help you be the best you can be at communicating the best news in the world.